Thank you for viewing our webinar sponsored by Simon's VIP Connect titled Navigating the World of Special Needs Planning. My name is Bethany Smith-Packard, one of the study coordinators for Simon's VIP Connect, and I'm joined by Mark Friese, Senior Vice President of Wealth Management Advisor and Portfolio Manager, and Chase Phillips, Financial Advisor, both with Merrill Lynch. During this presentation, Mark and Chase will discuss how proactive special needs planning can protect your family while providing an empowered life for your loved one living with disabilities. Following the presentation, we invite you to submit any questions you have for Mark and Chase by emailing the Simon's VIP Connect coordinator. That's at coordinator@simonsvipconnect.org. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Mark and Chase. Mark joined Merrill Lynch in 1987 and is a member of the Merrill Lynch Special Needs Council, which helps families assess and address the financial challenges of caring for a family member with special needs. He understands these challenges firsthand because his son, Christopher, has autism. Mark is passionate about sharing his knowledge and experiences with the special needs community. Chase joined Merrill Lynch in 2008. In addition to his work in helping clients to develop and implement financial strategies, Chase has a special focus on assisting families of individuals living with special needs by helping them to develop customized financial strategies and offering investment advice and guidance with regard to special needs trusts. Thanks for joining me, Mark and Chase, and I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Bethany, thank you very much for setting all this up, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience. I have a lot of personal experience, as Bethany talked about it, because 18 years ago my son was born and he is autistic. So a lot of families that are probably listening to this are either in that group where they have a family member that's autistic or they're servicing the community somehow. You know, all those people are important to us, and all those people have a great impact on the special needs world. Everybody probably remembers the first time that they realized their child had a special need. And a lot of emotions come out at that particular point in time, you know, fear, anger, trying to figure out what you're going to do next, where do you turn, what should I do now, what do I do in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. And the biggest question people have is what happens to my child when I'm gone, and who's going to take care of them. And so there's a lot of parts to that puzzle. So it's partly it's financial, partly it's legal, partly it's medical. And so we're going to talk about all those areas today with my business partner, Chase Phillips. So who's going to watch your child? Who's going to take care of them? That's the biggest fear. Are there going to be adequate financial resources to maintain a decent quality of life for our child? How much do I need? What will happen when schooling ends or when our child turns 18? In some states, I reside in Virginia, the age is 22. But it's still a turning point where your child has been in school the whole time, and now you're responsible for them. You have to find some place for them to work, some place for them to be involved. So it's a big turning point for a lot of families. So that's what we all worry about. So you're really planning not just for one life, but you're planning for two lives. So you've got to make sure that your child is okay, but you have to make sure you're okay too. Because if you're not okay financially as a parent, then your child's not going to be okay. So that means when you're doing financial planning, it's very specialized planning. Both Chase and I and the rest of our team have specialized training. We spend a lot of time learning about how you do long-term financial planning. There are very special tools that are used for families to do the calculations, which Chase will talk about in a few minutes on how much is it going to cost, and when do I need the money, and how am I going to come up with it, and how do I make sure the rest of my family knows how to do this in the most effective way. And your time horizon is very long-term because you're planning not just for one family but for two. And how do you make the calculations? And Chase will talk about that a little later. The primary objectives of special needs planning are defining your intentions for your child's quality of life when you're gone, making sure they're going to be okay. There's a lot of tools for that. Chase will talk about a special tool called a letter of intent, where you actually write some information down and make sure your family knows and the person taking care of your child in the future knows what needs to be done. You also want to make sure you use your assets effectively to preserve your child's quality of life. So do you have enough money? Is it invested the right way? Are you trying to preserve money for other people in your family? In my situation, my son is 18. He has a sister who is now about to turn 20. So she doesn't have any special needs other than a special need of a 20-year-old girl. but she is in a situation that she may have to take care of her brother. And I can tell you right now, at 20, she doesn't really want to do that. So how do you make sure that's going to be okay, and how do you set up the finances for that, and how do you make sure emotionally everybody's available for that, and how do you put people around your family that are maybe outside of your family, like grandparents or other people that want to care for your child with special needs, how do you get them involved? And so you want to preserve the estate. So planning for two or entire family can be a difficult task. There's a lot of pitfalls in the planning. A lot of families with disabilities do not have a financial strategy in place. A very sad statistic is about 70% of all people, not just special needs families, don't even have a will, which is a basic document you need in order to make sure your assets pass the right way. And the consequences for a child with disabilities are tragic if the families aren't prepared. So they could lose government benefits if they don't know the rules that the government has and how much money you're allowed to have in your child's name, or what is available within what's called a special needs trust, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Or bad cash flow planning. We've had a number of cases where the family has gotten money for a medical settlement and then spent that money down too quickly, not realizing the money is going to be needed over a very long period of time. Or poor investments. So you can't take a lot of risk with this money. Money has to last a long period of time, as you mentioned, for 2 generations. So expenses are very, very important. How much is it going to cost for that particular investment? Is that the right investment to make? In our practice, as an example, we use indexes, which are very low cost, and they provide families with a lower cost for the investment, and that way the money works a lot longer. Now, Chase is going to talk about assessing your situation.
Okay, Mark, thanks very much, and thanks all of you for taking the time to listen to these and say extremely important measures. And I'll tell you, families are dealing with a lot, and I know that this longer-term planning piece can tend to take the back seat. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is how to get organized, how to build a team. By Mark's comments and what you see on the screen, you can see that this is truly a multidisciplinary endeavor. Okay? So when we take a look at the professionals that are actually involved in your life, you can see them here on this screen. Right? In some cases, you're going to have an attorney who's taking care of estate planning, who's drafting a special needs trust. You might be working with a trust company to help really manage the trust. Maybe we're working with a financial advisor to tell you about how much you're going to need to fund in a trust, about how long cash flows will really last for your child. You may be working with somebody that's going to coordinate housing options for you. You may be working with a social worker who's really helping you dig into the benefits that are available to you at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal level. So as parents, you have to coordinate all of this, and it's overwhelming. Listen, I was born with spina bifida, and I've been around this firsthand, and I saw how overwhelmed my mom and dad were having to juggle all of these moving pieces. I like to compare it to eating an elephant in one sitting. There's a lot to take in. So if you can build a team to help you coordinate the moving pieces, it can be a much easier process. So with this slide, I've essentially showed you how you can really lean on 1 or 2 trusted advisors to help you quarterback the rest of the group. And in this case, you'll see the Merrill Lynch financial advisor highlighted in blue. But I'll tell you, it doesn't need to be a financial advisor. It can be. We serve this role for our clients, but it can be an attorney. It can be a trusted contact or advocate at a nonprofit that you work with. But you want to have somebody there that you can call and just ask general questions to. Somebody who knows the community. Somebody who knows the social workers who are going to have a good idea of what the benefits are. Somebody who knows a quality special needs attorney who's drafted many special needs trusts and has the experience to truly execute on that part of the planning. So again, keeping the pieces organized, trying to keep it simple, and having somebody you can really rely upon to help you organize all the professionals along the road. But there's more. We have professionals in place, but of course family wants to help out as well. I'll tell you, families want to help. Whether it be a sibling or a cousin or an uncle or a grandparent of your child, people will approach you and say, listen, what can I do? How can I make your life easier? And I think it's extraordinarily important to educate them. Let them know of what they need to do. Okay? I'm going to give you 2 examples. The first really pertains to how loved ones may want to gift money. Okay? It's common. Grandparents, perhaps they have some retirement assets, and upon their death, they want that money to go to benefit your child. But we can't have the money go directly to your child because we run the risk of losing our qualification for government benefits. So it's important to talk to those family members. It's important to talk to that grandparent and tell them, listen, if we want to leave money, we want to make sure we're leaving the money to our son or daughter's special needs trust, not directly in their name. And I tell you, you really want to make sure you follow up and make sure that the changes have been made on beneficiary designations. These assets pass outside of a family's will, and before you know it, if money's going directly into your child's name, it can truly jeopardize benefits. The second point here is perhaps a sibling of your son or daughter with a disability wants to come in to be a successor caretaker or a guardian. And I think it's important to talk to them about what that truly entails. It's a big responsibility. Parents, you guys do a lot that others don't even realize that you do, that probably you don't even realize you do. So having a very honest conversation about what that truly means to come in as a successor caretaker is really, really important. Now, how can we make preparation? How can we plan? How can we inform our loved ones who potentially want to come into the picture and possibly step in as a successor caretaker and guardian? And a good way to do that is by drafting a letter of intent. And I like to call this really a combination of instruction manual and biography for your child. It's a non-legal document, but essentially what it shows, what it tells a successor caretaker is, what's my child's regimen? What are his or her needs? What are his or her aspirations? As a parent, what are the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis that you're not sure you're doing, or that you don't even realize that you're doing? I'll give you a quick example of this. Perhaps your son or daughter, in order for them to take their medication, you need to put a little piece of peanut butter or some jam on the pill in order for them to take that. You can probably imagine that if you're out of the picture and somebody's coming in to take care of your son or daughter, they may not know that detail. Also within this document, certainly instructions and contact information of all the other professionals that are in your life, the people that we just talked about. And this is something that each one of you can start right away. All it really takes is taking a legal pad of paper and jotting down the little things you do on a day-to-day basis. And you'll be amazed. No one loves you the way you love your child, but the more detail this report has, the better somebody can come in and really fill your shoes. Okay, so we talked a little bit about special needs trusts, and I want to discuss briefly the different kinds and, generally speaking, how they work. Now, I'll tell you, this is a topic that could have its own webinar, so I'm not going to go into the deepest of detail. Just want to give you the basics. So historically, the way families would leave money to their kids is that essentially they wouldn't. Before 1993, in order to qualify for benefits, you needed to have less than $2,000 in assets in your name. And what families would do is essentially disinherit their children. Perhaps that money would go to a sibling or another loved one in hopes that that money would be used for the benefit of their loved one with a disability. As you can imagine, there are circumstances potentially when that money is not used for the benefit of that individual. So in 1993, legislation was passed so that assets could go into a special needs trust that will be used for the benefit of your loved one with a disability, and at the same time, those assets would not be counted against them when applying for government benefits. So it's truly a mechanism by where they can have assets and receive government benefits. These benefits predominantly being supplemental security income and Medicaid. Now, within the types of special needs trust, there's essentially two basic types. The first is what's called a third-party trust, and this would be the trust that would be funded from relatives. If grandparents wanted to leave money, that would go into a third-party trust. If parents wanted to leave retirement assets, that would go into a third-party trust. There's also what's called a first-party trust, and this is a trust that's funded from earnings or assets that actually belong to your child. So if they have earned income, this money would go into a first-party trust. Or perhaps if you won a settlement and received a lump sum of money, this would also go into a first-party trust. Now, typically these trusts are drafted by special needs attorneys, and of course somebody has to be trustee of the trust, and that can be a parent, that can be an attorney, that can be a corporate trustee or a trust company. Now, within those two types, you can also have what's called a pooled special needs trust, and the difference there is that it's a trust that is administered by a nonprofit organization, by where each beneficiary has their own separate account, but the assets held within the pool of the trust are managed together as a pool. The benefit there is you have the nonprofit serving and to administer the trust and to take care of the rules associated with that trust. And to help with the distributions, they know the rules for what can be paid for out of the trust. Now, one arrangement we see often is what's called a co-trustee, by where you have two entities serving as trustee. You have potentially the parent, the mother and father, as one co-trustee, and then the other being an attorney or a trust company. And the benefit for this arrangement is that, listen, parents know what their children need, but at the same time they may not be experienced in filing the taxes for the trust, administering the trust, knowing all of the legal ramifications and rules associated with the trust, knowing what's a qualified distribution. So often a co-trustee relationship between parent and attorney or trust company or corporate trustee can be an excellent alternative. Okay, so we want to explore some things that you can be doing and steps, if you will, to continue the planning process. So I'm going to give the reins back over to my partner, Mark, and he's going to get into some next steps that you can take on the legal side of the equation.
So as you see, analyzing guardianship and conservatorship options are really important. So who are you going to choose? And this should be thought about at the very beginning. So it shouldn't wait until your legal documents are all in place. So who would be a good guardian? Guardian is somebody who's going to be responsible for your child or for the adult at that particular point in time. Conservatorship would be somebody who's responsible for the money. So somebody's going to watch over it. Hopefully somebody has a little bit of financial background, has maybe dealt with this before. And it could have, you could have two people doing that. That doesn't necessarily just mean one single person. You also want to create an estate plan, and Chase talked a little bit about this, which would include your wills, your power of attorney, your medical care directives that if something happened to you or your child, who would take over, who would be able to give medical advice. It's also very important for a lot of families, and a lot of people don't know this, is when your child turns age 18, some of those rights that you had in order to look at their medical records go away. So it's important that you have sat down with somebody, most likely an attorney, and drafted some of these documents before that age. And Chase will talk a little about timelines in a few minutes. Choosing trustees and successor trustees and guardians is a very difficult job. For a lot of families, you have to look pretty deep in your family base. Somebody would be responsible for that, would be comfortable doing that. As Chase talked about, would know about your letter of intent, will have shared that information with them, is able to take over that job, and is willing to take over that job. And then you also want to review the options of establishing a special needs trust, or as Chase talked about, a special needs pool trust. So what are your options? How are you going to fund that particular trust? How much should you fund it with? There are a lot of financial parts, which Chase is going to talk about next in that, but the objective, obviously, to get that document set up is very, very important. It all needs to be coordinated. So beneficiary coordination is extremely important. So a lot of people may not realize it, but certain assets that you have actually pass outside of your will and pass outside of any trust that you might have set up. And those assets would include your 401k at work, which is a beneficiary designation-driven asset. Or it also include insurance benefits, which are also beneficiary designation-driven assets. So you need to make sure that in that particular document that you signed, probably when you started your job, if it's a 401k, that you've listed the people that you love, and you've listed them in the right place. So if it's an I love you will, I describe it with a couple, it's going back to the spouse. And then the next step would go back to your family. So if your child or your adult child with special needs is going to inherit that money, it's very important it doesn't go directly to him. Because as Chase alluded to, if that happened, they would then potentially be excluded from receiving additional government benefits. So instead of it going directly to them, it will go into that special needs trust that Chase talked about. And then reviewing housing options and ownerships. There's a lot of things going on right now, and my son, as I said, is 18. 18 years ago, a lot of this was not available, but it's really changed and it's getting better all the time. So parents are talking about co-oping, which means maybe 4 or 5 parents get together and they buy a house. That house is going to be housing special needs members, and maybe you hire somebody to kind of manage that house. So there's a lot of innovative and new strategies that are being used that we didn't have available a long time ago. And, of course, Chase talked about the letter of intent, kind of the instruction manual or the guidance tool that you're going to use to pass on to the next generation. I will say that we do have some examples of that. So people that are listening, if they wanted to get back in touch with us with the questions, we'd be happy to send you out some examples of letters of intent that we use for other clients. And then gifting strategies. How else are you going to get money for your child or your adult? And as Chase talked about, a lot of family outside of that, your core family, want to help. So how do you let them and give them instructions on the best way to do that? So as an example, if your grandparents wanted to give money and it came out of their retirement account, you need to make sure you tell them that the beneficiary should not be your child, but it needs to be your child's special needs trust. Or as an example, they have an insurance policy through their work, the grandparents once again. You need to make sure that the beneficiary designation on that is listing the child's special needs trust, not the child directly. So these are all important tidbits and kind of tools to be able to make sure that you're okay. Chase is going to now take over and talk about the financial factors.
Okay, so as we talked about, if the parents are not okay financially, it's going to be a situation that's not necessarily ideal for your child with a disability or loved one with a disability. So what can we do to get on track? The first thing you want to do is just get a good idea of what your assets are. Gather everything together. Make a spreadsheet. List your retirement accounts, your brokerage accounts, your house, all the assets that you have that could potentially be funding sources to make sure that your loved one will be okay. You can add up all your assets and really kind of start to look at what you're currently spending for your loved one. It's expensive. We all know it's expensive. Many families spending in excess between $30,000 and $60,000 a year for their loved ones with a disability. But we want to determine how long our savings will last. We need to determine how long our savings will last even as parents when we're no longer here. We want to certainly review the tax factors. There are many items that may be deductible to help you on the tax side of the equation. How do we build the optimum government benefit package? As I mentioned earlier, advocates in your area know the benefits that are going to be available to you. Very likely you have access to Medicaid waivers. I know that many organizations have mini grants that can pay for services from life skills coaching to housing to jobs training. There are many different services that can be paid for by local benefits that are available to you. So work with your advocacy team. Work with the nonprofits in your area to help discover what those are. And by the way, the waiting lists are typically long, so you want to get on those waiting lists early. You want to review to determine your child's eligibility to receive SSI and Medicaid. It's never too early to at least explore this to determine, okay, what do we need to do when our child turns 18 to make sure that they qualify? You want to explore options for drafting the special needs trust. It's never too early to do that, to have it set up and ready to go. And by the way, one of the most common questions we get from individuals is, once this trust is set up, what if our needs change? What if our child's needs change? What if they don't need the benefits? And in most cases, these special needs trusts can be terminated. So really work with the attorney and ask them those questions and make sure that this is not a document that's irrevocable. It very much should be revocable. You want to integrate financial plans. So if you've done retirement planning on your own, you want to make sure that you've incorporated planning for your special needs loved one as well. Because remember, we're planning for 2 lifetimes at one time. We're planning for the parent's lifetime in retirement, and then we need to plan for those years after the parents are gone. And in many cases, we're talking about 3 generations. So you may have parents of your own or grandparents of your children that need assistance as well and can certainly play a part in the overall planning scenario. So taking all accounts of your family to determine what needs to happen. Certainly want to review debt and finance options. People a lot of times forget that their home is an asset and can potentially be used upon your death for funding a special needs trust, and certainly talk to your attorney about how that works with owning a home. Review cost-sharing options. Again, benefits are out there for you at the state level, at the federal level. They're there to help, but the wait lists are long. Get started early. And of course, coordinating the legal and financial is key. Your attorney and your financial advisor should be in lockstep with one another. They need to know both what's going on the legal side of the equation and the financial. Make sure they know each other. Make sure that they're communicating with you on your behalf. Okay, so what are the priority things we can do? So what I'm going to talk now about is items that can be completed before age 18. Okay, so limiting assets in the child's name to $2,000 or less. Important to do, important to educate your loved ones about this. By the time you want to go in to apply for SSI, that already needs to have been done. Go apply for SSI and Medicaid benefits. And I'll tell you, it's not uncommon not to get accepted right away. Work with the professionals in your area. There are attorneys and advocates who specialize in helping families apply for these benefits, that know how to navigate the Social Security Administration. Tap into those resources. Applying for housing. There's a lot of housing benefits that are available to you. Again, it's not too early to look into these items because, again, the wait lists are out the door and around the corner. Research government agencies that are available that may provide support. Again, as Mark alluded to, look at options for housing. Group housing is on the rise. Microboards are on the rise. Talk with the families that are in your network. Get together with them. Think outside the box. A few people getting together can make a huge difference. Rely on each other. Perhaps you have solutions that people haven't already thought of. Review your insurance. Extremely important. You probably have an insurance policy where you work. That's a potential asset. People have assets they don't necessarily know exist. So go deep within your situation. Find out what you have. Insurance can be a very key funding tool for your loved one's special needs trust. And then finally, working with professionals that have experience. And I really believe that having conversations with other families about who they've used is a great way to find out who truly understands your situation. It's who are the individuals that know the professionals that can be there to help you. Who are the individuals that can refer you to all the other things that you're going to need. This is important stuff, and I know it's a lot to swallow, but take it one step at a time, and before you know it, you're going to be the one educating your peers. Thank you so much for the time having us.
Thank you so much, Mark and Chase, for this great information about this really important topic. And thanks to everyone for viewing our webinar. Please remember to submit any questions for our presenters to coordinator@simonsvipconnect.org.